I will now recognize myself to go last. Gentlemen, 5 minutes is not much time to resolve issues. It's barely enough time to raise them. So I don't know that I'll have that many questions for you other than raise points that I would like you to reflect upon. And then over the course of your tenure, and as long as I'm in Congress, would like to work with your respective agencies to see if we can make some progress. I know both of you have been in the justice system before, so you've seen the majesty of a system that exceeds people's expectations. There's a reason we have a phrase, may justice be done though the heavens fall. And it is beautiful and majestic to watch a justice system that inspires people. On the other side, if you've ever had witnesses that had knowledge refuse to cooperate, you've had victims that had no expectation whatsoever that the system would work for them. Perception is reality, and when you have communities among our American family that don't have confidence in the justice system, it's all of our problems. And we can debate the legitimacy of those perceptions, but the perceptions remain. So my focus on whatever amount of time I have left in this job is to try to find that justice system that is not just respected, but worthy of respect, aspirationally worthy of respect. So I'm going to raise some issues that may be unusual for Republicans to raise. And I will start with the ratio between cocaine base and cocaine powder. I understand it's a rational basis test. I understand we just have to have a reason for it, or at least they did when the law was initially passed. But at some point, Mr. Rosenberg, I'd love to sit down with whoever the pharmacological experts are at DNA, at the DEA, and understand what it is about the pharmacology of baking soda that makes the ratio 18-1. And if there is a basis for it, then help me understand it. I get, going back to con law, there's a rational basis test, but confidence in the justice system is the most compelling national interest we could possibly have. So I'd love to work with the DEA and understand why a 1-to-1 ratio isn't better. Mandatory minimums. Some think they work great in violent crime cases. I would be in that camp. Less so for perhaps economic or nonviolent crime cases. Also, as a former prosecutor, know mandatory minimums are an effective way to get folks to cooperate. But whether or not the drug amount levels need to be raised, whether there can be some proportionality as we treat methamphetamine and heroin and cocaine powder and cocaine base. Marijuana, it takes tractor trailers full to reach a mandatory minimum, but not so with other drugs. To my friends at ATF, 924E, I haven't seen the statistics, but when you have someone who has more than one felony conviction, and they are in possession of a firearm or ammunition, that has a lot more jury appeal. Trust me, I get the lack of jury appeal for 922G cases. I lived it. It is hard to get a jury interested in lying and buying or simply being a felon in possession of a gun that you're going to use to go squirrel hunting and you had a conviction 20 years ago. There is not a lot of jury appeal. Murder cases have jury appeal. But our objective is to prevent the murder prosecution, is to save the life. And I've seen it done in South Carolina. Bill Nettles was the United States Attorney in South Carolina. He was appointed by President Obama, so politically we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. But he did great work, that part of 922G that deals with domestic violence. South Carolina ranks #1 in the nation in men killing women. So he used the 922G, that subsection that relates to orders of protection and domestic violence convictions. That's a misdemeanor. It's not a felony in South Carolina. Certain domestic violence cases are. But to Chairman Goodlatt's point, it'd be great to see, it'd be great for me to see your referrals versus the declinations. If you're getting the cases from state and locals and you're writing up a blue book or whatever they call them now, and it's being declined by the Assistant United States Attorney, we need to know it. And if you're presenting 924E cases and they're being declined, we need to know it. And I'm not beating up on prosecutors, I actually like them, but I need to know where if there's been a decrease in firearms prosecutions, it's either the referrals have dried up, or you're not adopting them, or you're adopting them and they're being declined. And we need to figure that out. 922G also includes a subsection for people who have been adjudicated mentally defective. Those are the words of the statute. Those are not my words. So we'll just go with mental illness. Those who have been adjudicated mentally ill. That is already against the law for someone who's been adjudicated that to possess a firearm or ammunition. And when I look at the statistics for the prosecutions, they're anemic. And I don't know if it's because the cases aren't being referred, if they're not being adopted, or if there's been a declination. So within firearms, one other point, I hear some of my friends mention a gun show loophole. There may be a background check loophole, but there's not a selling of a firearm to a prohibited person loophole. You can be prosecuted for giving a firearm to a prohibited person, whether you're an FFL or not. And one way to get the attention of folks who don't think that they have to do background checks is to see an uptick in prosecutions for folks who fail to ask simple questions. Are you a convicted felon? Have you been adjudicated mentally ill? Are you subject to a restraining order in a domestic violence case? The notion that you can sell a firearm to whoever you want to is just not accurate. Maybe from a background check, but not from the actual transfer of the weapon. And last point, Mr. Rosenberg, I know it's hard to prosecute doctors. I grew up with one. He's the most popular person in the community that I grew up in, and I never would have won the district attorney's race had it not been for my father. I get how popular doctors are. Also get that it's impossible to get a prescription without going to a doctor. And there used to be a DEA diversion group that investigated physicians who were writing prescriptions outside the course of a legitimate medical practice. I assume DEA is still doing that. I hear more on the drug companies, the distributors, than I do that middle component. But getting physicians to understand that you cannot write prescriptions for controlled substances on napkins at a bar for someone that you just met, which is the fact pattern of one of the cases I handle. Getting that message out may also be part of us combating the opioid epidemic that we have. So I'm going to recognize the ranking member for her concluding remarks, but I'll just tell you this, raised a lot of issues. I would love, not you, you're too busy and you're too busy, but just assign someone to come help me either understand what's going on, or maybe we can make improvements on where they ought to be made. I want a justice system that people respect. So with that, you're welcome to respond, and then I'm going to recognize a ranking member from Texas.